Now, you've traveled all over the country in your career. Why did you choose Colorado as your post-military home base?
We spent almost 20 years in Hawaii, and that's where I wanted to go back to. I mean, sun, surf,
That's
sand,
what
clear blue 82 every day. I mean, it was just, oh, I loved it. And I love the people. After 20 years, I mean, that's family. That's Ohana. I miss so many people deeply. But Gary, all of our family and friends were here on the mainland, and my husband Gary, he has three children in San Diego area, and the grandkids are there. At the time, our parents were still living. It was just too far from family, so he didn't want to
Mm.
go back there and live in Hawaii forever. So I said, okay, maybe not north, not south, not east or west. And it just kept going like this. And then it came down to sports teams. Well, I don't like that team. I don't like that team. And I knew all along it was going to be Colorado, right? I did. I knew all along. And I
Is
just
he a
kept
big
flip.
is he a big Denver fan of all the
Oh
sports
no,
teams?
he is orange and blue all the way, fighting Illini, Bears, Bulls, Cubs, all Chicago sports. But nobody wants to
Okay.
live in the Chicago area, right? Okay. So,
Yeah.
4 seasons, mild winter, no bugs, no humidity. I mean, strong military community, resources as far as exchange and, access to military care at the hospital and golf courses, things like that, MWR. But mainly it was just the climate here. And people say, oh, the winters, it's so cold. We want to get out of here. I'm like, oh, this is so nanny panny, these winters. Are you kidding me? I grew up in Minnesota. He grew up in Chicago area. I mean, this is nothing. So we
you
do.
know,
We love it here.
That's awesome. I did notice you had spent a lot of time in Hawaii, so I was wondering, like, wow, why didn't you talk about wanting to go back to Hawaii? And my wife was born in Hawaii; she was born at
Oh,
Schofield Barracks, so I always wondered, so being two hours, 20 years there, I was like, and that's such a good reason to like live in Hawaii to have your kid. Hey, kids, come spend your vacation at grandma's. You know?
exactly. But what I found is once family came for that one time, that was the last time that it's a one and done type of thing. Trip to
Yeah,
Hawaii, right? There's other
yeah,
places to go and see and things like that. So that's what I found is that once family came the one time, then the travel was all on us after that.
gotcha. Very good.
Yeah.
Uh, so from what I can tell, and I've just perused the Born the Battle previous 135 episodes that my predecessor did before I became the host, but I could be wrong. But from what I could tell, you were the first senior enlisted advisor to come on Born the Battle. So congrats.
Yay!
Another first
Thank
for you.
you.
Another first for you.
I'm not
Um,
telling my husband that he would add it to a list or something. Thank you for having me. This is fantastic. And I'm
no
proud to
worries.
represent all senior enlisted advisors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you advise the chief of the National Guard Bureau, you hear of the Army National Guard, you hear, you know that seal with the Minuteman, the seal for the Air National Guard. It makes sense that there's a centralized headquarters that brings the two together to advise the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. You just never hear about it.
I know, right? It's so disappointing that still in 2021 we're still having to fight to make our mark. And you
Mm,
hear National Guard all the time because we are so present in states now across the country with all this unrest, let alone all the
yeah,
deployed locations across the world, right?
yeah,
But you don't necessarily hear about the chief of the National Guard Bureau as often as you do like the chief of staff of the Army or the chief of staff of the Air Force and the other services. Uh, it's just we're still finding our way, I guess, on some levels. But it's kind of sad to say that we have our 4-star, the chief of the National Guard Bureau, that sits at the table with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has full voting rights like all the others that sit on that on the chairman's staff there, and you don't hear as much about the chief of the National Guard Bureau. But we're always
yeah.
ready. We're always there whenever needed.
And it's so iconic. That seal of the Minuteman's so iconic.
Yeah.
The seal of the national. So you just don't normally see
Yeah.
the bureau seal. It's just interesting when I was
Right.
doing my research that I was like, okay, well that makes sense. It makes
Yeah.
logical sense that these two come together at a headquarters
Sure.
level.
And that's our symbol. I'm looking at my Minuteman right now. That's our symbol of the National Guard, where, back in those days that businessmen and women put down their tools of commerce and they picked up their musket to defend the homeland. And we're still doing
Yeah.
it today.
Yep. Yep. Now the reserves aren't part of this bureau, right? Because
No,
is that due to the base differences of the Guard being more of the state entities and the reservists still
right.
being like the federal
Federal,
with the federal?
right.
Gotcha. So
So the National
Naval
Guard has
Reserve,
that,
Marine Corps
right.
Reserve, sorry, Army
Okay.
Reserve, sorry about that, guys.
You
You're not included.
we love them all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, Interesting. Well, we'll get in that role into a bit, but one of the first questions we always ask here on Borne the Battle is where and when did you know that military service was going to be the next step in your life?
Boy, I had gone through some changes in my young adult life, right? I had been married and divorced, and I was working at a bank, and I just saw no future outside of my hometown. I felt like I'm just going to be stuck here. Didn't have, a higher level education. Go ahead.
Married and divorced before your service?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. Which
Okay.
was tough, tough, tough. And
Yeah.
and
So you
a
had that experience
decision
going in.
I did, and a decision not made lightly at all.
Yeah.
Being very, very strong, devout Catholic family, and
Oh,
thank
wow.
God I had the support of my family and especially my father. Otherwise, things could have looked completely different. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I had been married and divorced probably before I went into the Air Force about 4 years already. So it was a chance meeting, really. Back in the day, if you remember, you're probably too young for this, but back in the day, people actually brought their checks into the bank to deposit them on Friday afternoon, right after they got off work. Physical
Yeah.
hard check. And I was, on the teller line, and I had befriended lots of people, a small town, 6,500. I knew everybody that came to that bank. And I
Oh, yeah.
befriended this soldier from the Minnesota Army National Guard, and she and I would chat, every week when she would come in, or every other week, and just chit chat. And one day she walked in and she said to me, "Denise, I see so much more potential in you than this. Why don't you join the Air Force and get out of this town?" And it was kind of like that V8 moment, right? My dad is a Korea War veteran. He served in the Minnesota Army National Guard for a couple of decades, but he had talked to his kids about service to our country, about what it meant to put on the uniform. He didn't talk about, the benefits and education and learning a job skill or any of those types of things. So when my good friend, Staff Sergeant Joyce Madsen, then at the time, she said that, she literally drove me to the next town. I took a sick day, right? She drove me to the neighboring town to meet with a recruiter. Let me tell you, that day he was on his game, in a good way, though, because I bought everything hook, line, and sinker. He talked about serving our country and what that meant, about what the uniform stood for, about what our flag. I mean, he talked about all that patriotic piece first. And then
Yeah.
he talked about learning a job skill and education benefits, which was really something that I wanted. But in our family, there wasn't money for higher education, and you didn't do loans. You pay as you go or you don't go.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm all in. I went back, resigned my position, sold my car, sold my furniture, put my stuff in mom and dad's attic, and 6 weeks later, I was gone.
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Now,
Yeah.
now you entered in 85 and I understand, so you started as a big, hey, I was still cashing checks in 2001 at McDonald's.
Were you?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I get you, but I totally get you. So you
I
joined in
came in
80.
actually in November of 84. Yeah, it was late
Okay.
in 84. Yep.
Gotcha. Well, it was a couple months before I was born, but
Oh,
still.
thanks. Oh.
Not dating you at all. No,
I
so
am feeling old today, too.
no, you shouldn't. No, you should definitely shouldn't. Uh, Experienced it matters, right? So,
That's right.
so you entered in 84. Started off in is it Offutt? How do you say that? Is it Offutt Air
Offutt
Force Base?
Air Force Base in Nebraska. That was my first duty assignment after I completed my basic military training and my tech school.
So, did you start off your career as active duty? Is that
I
an active
did.
duty?
Yes,
Gotcha,
I
gotcha.
did.
So, when did you transition to the Air National Guard, and why did you decide to leave active duty?
Well, I met a Marine, and yeah, hoorah.
Ah, love it.
Yeah, that's a long story that I won't go into. But after 5 dates and knowing each other 3 weeks, we got engaged. Woo!
Oh man, you were
Yeah.
that story.
Yeah, I was that story, but 34 years later, we're
Hey,
still here, okay?
absolutely. Absolutely.
It should have never worked, okay? But here you had an active duty Marine and an active duty airman, and never the twain shall meet, right? So he
Yeah.
already had 10
Yeah.
years in the Marine Corps, so it made sense for me. I did not want to get out. I loved the Air Force. It was my calling, it was my niche, but I was able to Palace Chase, which is a fancy couple words for transfer, into the Air
Mm,
National Guard. I had about a year and a half left on my contract. The requirement was that you give the Guard double the time back than you had on your active duty contract. So I had to give at least a 3-year commitment to the National Guard, which I was fine with that. I didn't plan on getting out anyway. So that way it
yeah.
allowed me to transfer with my husband.
Makes
So
sense.
my
So
first, my first
family.
Yep. So my first National Guard state was California, and I served 3 years in the California Guard. And then he got
Mm.
orders to Hawaii, and so then I, picked up too, and I transferred to the Hawaii Air National Guard. And 20 years later,
That's great. No, no, you defied the statistics as me and my wife did as well. We got married 7 months, or we got engaged 7 months after my deployment. So I'm
wow,
right there with you in
good,
defying those odds.
congratulations.
Yeah, no,
That's a rarity.
it is, it is. We're coming up on 13 years now
Wow, good for
of
you.
being together, 13 and 14 years being together. So no, definitely, that's great. Didn't know you were married a Marine.
Yep.
Love that part of the story. Uh, during your time in service, give me either a best friend or your greatest mentor.
Oh, I have a mentor story for you.
All right,
So
let's hear
here
it.
I am. I'm a command chief at this point, right? And I'm serving in a combat comm headquarters for my full time job, and then my military job, which is confusing to so many if they don't understand the guard. On a drill weekend, I'd walk across the street, and I was a command chief for the 154th Wing, at that time the largest, most complex wing in our Air Force. So we had this leadership day, and so I'm with the folks that I work with Monday through Friday, and the colonel is leading this particular part of this leadership block. And it was all about mentorship. And then he's decided to go around the room and ask who our mentor was. That's not the era that I grew up in through the military. In the late
Yeah.
80s and in the 90s, there wasn't mentorship for me. That was my experience, okay? I didn't have a supervisor or a colleague or a leader in my path that mentored me. So he's going around the room, and on my hands, I'm literally wringing them under the table because I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? All the officers are coming up with these grand names of who their mentor is, which was fabulous for them. But that wasn't my case. So he
Yeah.
gets to me and he says, Chief, who is your mentor? And I just kind of put my head down and I said, kind of what I just mentioned to you. And then I said, I don't have a mentor. However, there is someone that I admired for growing up and my whole life. Well, who's that, Chief? Mary Tyler Moore. And the room just kind of broke out in laughter. And I get that. I totally get it.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so I said, but let me explain. Mary Tyler Moore, in the 60s, she was the only woman in this very male dominant, all male newsroom. And she stood firm on her own 2 feet and she made decisions and she bucked the system and she asked questions and she tried to make things better. And I admired her for that because she had grit, she had perseverance. And I thought, if Mary Tyler Moore can do it, so can I.
Yeah.
And that was my answer. Now, that said, when I got in that kind of that master sergeant, tech sergeant, master sergeant level, I recognized that I needed to grow. And I really started watching people. I kind of created my own mentorship path, right? And I watched, we had a female governor at the time. Phenomenal, Linda Lingle, phenomenal governor. And our tag was amazing. And I would watch these senior leaders and I would watch how she how she was so poised at the podium and listen to the words that she used and how she walked through a room and just a couple words here and spend a couple minutes there. And I would listen to our senior leaders, and it was almost like I was stalking them, but in a good way. But I
Mm,
learned from them and I paid attention because I was a huge introvert. I could be in the back of a room in a corner and I'd be just fine. But
it's
I
like my wife.
recognize that if you want to be a senior leader, you got to get out and have those extrovert tendencies. So I really took that to heart and I learned. I forced myself to do things that were very uncomfortable.
Now you served from the mid '80s all the way to 2013, and you've talked about women in the military. How has women in the military changed in that 28 years?
Oh gosh, so much. There are so many opportunities for women today. And so I didn't see, when you look at that proverbial, leadership, the pictures on the wall, right? There weren't women on that
Yeah,
wall in the pictures. Today there are. Today there's all many officer enlisted women leaders that have competed equally, toe to toe with their male counterparts. So that has changed.
yeah,
Opportunities in different MOSs and AFSCs, job career wise, so many women are able to compete at different things. And this was always my mantra. The standard is the standard. It doesn't matter if it's a male standard or a female standard. It should be one standard. And if a woman or a man meets that standard and exceeds it, they ought to be able to compete for any job that is open to them. And I get
yeah.
that women, there's some differences in body structure, and there are some things. Not every woman can carry a 100-pound pack and all the equipment that goes with that. I get that, okay. But if a woman can meet the standards, whatever that standard is, they ought to be able to compete. So I saw women being selected for leadership positions. I saw lots of women stepping up into those roles as first sergeants, as flight commanders, squadron commanders, you name it. So the world is just been opened up for our women.
And like you said, as long as the standard doesn't change and everybody can
That's
meet
right.
that standard
That's right.
and keep the military as lethal as we need it to be,
Absolutely.
then let's rock, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
So,
And there was a
um,
lot, there was a lot of blowback, from when we changed to having women on ships and things like that, women,
yeah.
going forward, deploying and whatnot. Oh my goodness, there was a lot of blowback on that.
Fun fact: the first female captain of a ship in the Navy, her name is Darlene Iskra, and I didn't know that. Not related. We don't think we're related. We didn't. So I had to interview her, so she's in our archives. She was one of the last ones that I interviewed in person before COVID. I got to
How
meet her.
cool is that?
We took a photo to see, are we really? And come to find out, she lives in Washington State, where I grew up
Wow.
now. So, is there a relation? We don't
Just
know, but there's not
you
many
gotta
Iskras out there.
you gotta get on that what is it, DNA, so
Oh,
ancestry.
we should. We definitely should. We
How fun
definitely
would that
should.
be?
Oh my gosh, it was wild, but it was a wild conversation. So if you're listening to this and you like where we're going with this episode, check out that one episode as well. Um, 28 years of service, Denise. I do see the GWAT Expeditionary Service Medal as part of your bio, which tells me you were in Iraq or Afghanistan during OIF 1 or 2, because they stopped giving that one out around that time. Being the senior enlisted advisor, advising the chief of the National Guard Bureau, you have, as well, you've had to have had active time. How much of that of those 28 years were of active time?
So he had Title 10 active duty, and then I became what we call a drill status guardsman, part time, right? M Day. The soldiers are familiar with M Day. And then, I became a full time technician, and then I went into an AGR program, Active Guard and Reserve. And then,
Okay.
in the final tour, back on Title 10. So when you add up the Title 10 on that bookend, the career, and the AGR time in the middle, I had about 12 years of active service.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
which was nice.
um, I know, because the reason I asked that, because I know the VA, in order to recognize to be a veteran, you have to have a certain number of hours or years. Correct? I'm
Oh
not sure
no.
how that.
I mean, if you served, and have an honorable discharge, you're a veteran. Now,
Gotcha.
some other benefits are tied to years, like VA home loans, right? A National Guardsman that has never deployed has to have served for like 6 years in order to utilize the VA home loan program. So like for me, I'm a disabled vet, so I was
Yeah.
able to have benefits right off the bat.
Gotcha.
So when a guardsman retires, they're not able to collect their military retirement until age 60, or if they have
Yeah.
deployed time, it's backed up a little bit, right? So there's a difference there. Um,
Yeah, I knew that there was some time that was tied to some benefits within the
yeah,
VA and that's different for what they call gray area veterans or
Yep.
something like that.
Yep.
I know some of my listeners have asked about that, and so I figured you were the chief of that of a you were the senior enlisted. I was like, I don't
Yeah.
really know myself. I probably should do a benefits breakdown episode on like gray area veterans
Yeah.
or whatever they call it. But
Yeah, it is. So when my father turned, 65, he was still paying for Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I'm like, Dad, why? You have TRICARE for life now. You are a retired guardsman. He didn't retire with an active duty retirement. He retired with some active duty service, combined with his National Guard time. So he retired as what we would call a M-Day or a drill status guardsman, a part-time person. So he
yeah,
wasn't able to utilize those military benefits until 65. So when he turned 65, I'm like, you got to stop paying for this. But he just didn't trust. He didn't trust, right? And I'm like, okay, you need to go and make an appointment and sit down and talk about it because you're paying all this money for insurance and you've earned this benefit. So he
yeah,
may have retired, say, for example, when he was 58, but didn't start being able to use his military, the healthcare part until 65. And I'll
okay,
tell you what a blessing that was. My mom ended up on dialysis for nearly 11 years. And between the TRICARE and the Medicare, they didn't pay, for her,
yeah.
for all of her care, which was just amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, I need to do an episode on that to figure out what, you know, part of this podcast is I want to be able to inform veterans,
Sure.
about a lot of the benefits that they deserve. And I think a lot of the gray area is with National Guard veterans. So
It
I
is.
definitely
And I
should dig into that.
And I do want to just give a big plug for the VA home loan benefit out there. I do because our guard and reservists, and I want to say my experience was more so our guardsmen and women, they don't get that briefing their whole career because on a drill weekend it's bam, 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 training, training, training on a drill weekend. You don't get
Yeah.
those nice to know briefings all the time, right? And of course you have to be ready to receive it if you do happen to get one. You might not be in that place to buy a home, but our National Guard warriors, all of our veterans can utilize the VA home loan benefit where they can purchase a home with zero money down. That's
Yeah.
huge today.
And an
It's
extremely low
huge.
interest rate, especially right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
check it out, warriors. Check it out.
Yeah, we have a full benefits breakdown on episode 150 of the
Okay.
VA home loan. And then there's also we just did a recent benefits breakdown on the EARL, the interest rate reduction
Awesome.
refinance loan,
Awesome.
through the loan guarantee service. We got a couple of the subject matter experts. We sat them down and we shook them. We said, okay, from the time
Yeah.
that you're thinking about buying a home to the time that you're in your home and you're getting spam mail for your refinance loan, everything in between. Let's break it down. So if you get a chance, check out those episodes if you're listening to this.
Okay.
Um, First senior enlisted advisor to a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff as a female. Again, we never hear about the chief of the National Guard Bureau. Unique gig. What is the selection process like for one of those positions? Do they tell you, hey, you're in the running to be the senior enlisted advisor? Does the selection of the chief weigh into that factor? How does that selection process go?
So for me, and I think it might be a little bit different today. So for me, in Hawaii, I was serving as the Hawaii National Guard Senior Enlisted Leader. So I had oversight of
Sounds
the
like a great
enlisted
gig.
corps. It was. So oversight of both our Army Guard and Air Guard enlisted corps. So I had the joint experience. So National Guard, Army, Air, right? So when
Yeah,
my predecessor was getting ready to retire, he'd actually reached out to the state senior enlisted leaders that were serving in that joint billet because they wanted someone that had that joint experience at the Guard Bureau level. So
makes
when he
sense.
called me, I was like, I'm good. I'm in Hawaii. It's clear blue and 82 today. You know what? We're taking care of soldiers and airmen here. There's a lot of work to be done. I assured our adjutant general that I was with him till the end. And I just, I'm in Hawaii. You want me to come to DC? You know what? I wasn't interested.
Totally different style of life, I'm
Yeah.
telling you.
So a month, that job announcement, and it was a job announcement that went out nationwide, opened and closed. Well, lo and behold, it opened for a second time. Hey, Chief, what do you think? I'm still good. I'm in Hawaii. We had a lot of work that needed to be done yet at that point, and I just felt like I was supposed to be there. But here, this job announcement is open a second time, and there weren't a lot of senior enlisted leaders throughout our states that were dual hatted with Joint Army Air. Okay,
Okay.
so I was taking a college class at that time, and so that job opened and closed, right? And this class that I was taking, I was supposed to write a resume for any job that I was interested in. I thought, well, I'm going to write to something I know. I took that job announcement, did my resume, and when I hit send, I said, "Dang, I could have done that job." Well, lo and behold, some time passes and it opens up for a third time. Now, there's a reason for all that I won't get into, but it opens up for a third time. And now the hair on the back of my neck is starting to stand up a little bit. And my husband and daughter all along said, "You need to apply, Mom. You need to put your hat in the ring. You need to do it. Oh, no, no.
Mm.
I'm good. I always saw
I'm in
myself.
Hawaii.
Yeah,
Come on.
I
Yeah.
always saw myself retiring with the men and women that I had spent, nearly 2 decades at that point of my life with,
Yeah.
right? I mean, this
Yeah.
this was my family. We went through the ranks together. And so the tag and I went down to the Philippines, down to Holo. We had soldiers that were deployed down there. And so I'm sitting on a plane on the way back, and this job announcement's still open, right? And so I'm sitting on the plane, very, very spiritual. And now I'm just praying, and I'm, asking the good Lord that if this is His path for me, you have to show me a sign, because I don't feel it. I don't feel called to it. Other leadership positions, I felt a calling to
Yeah.
do, put my name in the hat. And so I for a long time, I just sat in prayer, and then I just closed my eyes, sat back, and tried to just listen. And I'll tell you, back when I was in uniform, I couldn't tell this story because you couldn't talk about God, right? So I just said, "Oh, it was my intuition." But I will tell you today, as I'm sitting here, the power of the Holy Spirit washed over me in a fierce way. I mean, it was strong and powerful, and I just felt this presence come over me. And I
Yeah.
opened my eyes, and it was a little scary. I kind of looked around like, we're still in the air, right? I mean, it was scary. So I got home and I took a day of leave, and I just sat by myself in prayer and thought about what this would be like for our family, what it would mean to leave Hawaii and all the people that I'd served with for all this time. And the answer just kept coming back that I am supposed to do this. And so I put my package together, I submitted it, and I thought to myself, there's not a snowball's chance in heck. Here I am all the way in Hawaii and all the way to DC. I know no one in DC. I don't know the chief of the National Guard Bureau, the senior leaders. They don't know me. It's
Yeah.
not like I'm, traveling and spending a lot of time in the DC area. So I didn't think I would have a chance. Sure enough, I got a call that, I made the top five. And so I did a phone interview, which was horrible because I got disconnected and the time was off, and oh my gosh, it's a whole nother story. And so I was
So you're
doing
probably
this.
thinking like, they probably don't think I know logistics or
No, it's
S6.
awful. Back in the BlackBerry days, you had to stand by the window to
Oh
get a
my
cell
gosh.
cell service,
Yeah.
right? In a hotel. It was crazy. So I was doing this event called Over the Edge Waikiki. And it was rappelling off the Sheraton Waikiki 33 stories down for Special Olympics, which
Okay.
I was not going to do. And I'd said, my calendar is too full. I'm not going to do this event. And I got an email from one of my soldiers that said, "Hey, Chief, we set 5 command staff slots aside, ... unless you're chicken." Oh, are you calling me out? So clear the deck. I'm going to be there. So, of course, we're told nothing in your pockets, leave your phones in the car because nothing can drop on the people down below, right? So I
Yeah.
left my everything in the car except my keys. So I rappelled down, and it was a great experience. And, it was pretty cool, to tell you the truth. It's just,
Sounds pretty
here's
cool.
Diamond Head, and you're looking out over the ocean, rappelling down the Sheraton Waikiki. What?
That's cool.
So I
That's
get
cool.
back to my car, and, as the kids say, the phone blew up, and here was the chief of the National Guard Bureau's office, the tag, the Hawaii Air Guard commander. I'm like, oh, oh. And my husband, right? Because they called him looking for me because I wasn't answering my phone, right? And I wasn't in the
Yeah.
office. And he
Yeah.
tells, the chief of the National Guard Bureau's secretary, "Oh, she's rappelling down 33 stories of Sheraton Waikiki." It's like, what? And so then
We're a
I,
little different out here in Hawaii. Yeah.
yeah, we may reconsider her application. So I got a
That's probably
hold
exactly
of
what they were looking for. Someone that was probably going like, "Oh, she's doing
crazy.
what? Oh, she's totally
Exactly.
the face that we want. That is the face of the National Guard."
So
Go ahead. I'm
I
sorry.
got a hold of General McKinley and he offered me the position, told me to talk to my family and think about it. And I said, no, sir, you don't put your, a package in and then if offered the position, decide to think about it. And I said, I accept. I accept. And it's just logistics and so that was it. And it happened very
Wow.
fast after that, very fast.
Wow. So did your husband at that point get orders to come to Virginia as well?
He had retired. So Gary, my
Okay.
husband, retired in 1996. And that's when I looked at him in those big baby brown eyes and said, baby, it's my turn. And he knew exactly what I meant by that. And that was the turning
Yeah.
point for me to be able to say, I'll go, pick me. I'll take that deployment. I'll go to that class. I'll go to that leadership training. I'll go because he was the stability then at home. And really, he was the one that enabled me to do the things that I was able to do because when he was on active duty, I kept the home fires burning, right? In Hawaii, he kept the air conditioning on, but
Yeah.
so it was really great. And I want to share with you real quick. So when the sergeant major of the Army or the chief master sergeant of the Air Force are leaving their positions, the National Guard is able to nominate a soldier and an airman for those respective positions to compete for the sergeant major of the Army or the chief master sergeant of the Air Force.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I happened to be that particular year when Chief Jim Roy was retiring from that position. I happened to be the nominee for that position. And again, I thought, are you kidding me? All these active duty chiefs that are out there serving, in 4-star billets across our Air Force, there's no way. And when the Air Force Times, did their picks, I was nowhere in that top 5 pick.
Oh
And lo and
wow.
behold, I did. I did make the top 5 and I did interview for the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, which was one of the most highest honors of my entire career to be able to do that. And I'm telling you this because I want our National Guard soldiers and airmen to know that that opportunity exists. And why not them? I believe someday we will have a National Guard soldier or airman serve in one of those positions. And that
Yeah.
particular year, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force called me and said, Chief, it was between you and another chief. And I selected, the other chief, which was fine. That wasn't my path. It was his path. And that airman that he chose, that chief, was in my air traffic control class 25 years earlier. Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, James Cody. He and I were
Small
good
world.
friends. His wife and I were good friends. And here we are 25 years later competing for the same position. It was crazy. But
Small world.
yeah, it is.
Definitely
It
small world.
is.
So was that your time? Was that after the chief of the National Guard Bureau, after your senior enlisted advisor to the chief, or is that like before?
Yeah, it was right toward the end. Gosh, I would probably been in the seat for about 3 years at that point.
So it was you were looking at that as the
It would
next
have been. It
after
would
the
have been
gotcha.
right.
Well, still
Yeah, but
to be considered that close to it,
oh,
that's
such an
amazing.
honor. Such an
Yeah.
honor. Yeah.
Um, so during your time as the senior enlisted advisor to the chief of the National Guard Bureau, what would you say would be the greatest achievement for the Guard during that time that you could say you can help put a stamp on back? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm so glad we were able to do that.
So during my time, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was overturned. And there was a lot of meetings and discussion and input given. I would have members of that committee that were working on that come to my office and have discussions with me about because the training had to be different for the National Guard than it was for the rest. Oh, I should say the reserve as well because we're not there every day. You can't say, okay, Air Force, you've got 30 days to complete this training and say the same thing to the Guard and Reserve because you're
Mm,
only there for 2 days out of that 30 days, right?
makes
So that's
sense.
just one
Yeah.
example. So we had to talk about that. So there were some things that I was able to give input that made a difference. But the biggest, most significant thing during my time, I was serving for a 4-star. The 4-star, was the chief of the National Guard Bureau. Um, he got he got his second star before excuse me, his fourth star, apologize, his fourth
Yeah.
star before I came into that position. But he wasn't a full voting member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He
Wow.
was invited to the table. He was able to express, his opinion and give counsel to the chairman, etc. But he didn't have a full vote.
So it was kind of like the Coast Guard.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. So then in 2012, he became a full voting member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And that was huge for the National Guard. It was
Yeah.
huge. And I
Yeah.
get that the Chief of Staff of the Army and the Chief of Staff of the Air Force cover down for their components, the Reserve and the Guard, right? They're the 4-star for active Guard and Reserve. Excuse me. But because of our unique state mission, the role of the National Guard on the border, throughout the cities right now
Yeah.
that are in,
Yeah.
uproar, burning, etc., it was that is the National Guard. Title 32, that state piece belongs to the Chief of the National Guard Bureau. So I think that had a huge impact on him getting that, the full voting rights. And NAGAS, our National Guard Association of the United States, and INGAS, the Enlisted Association of the National Guard of the United States, those two veteran service organizations, if you will, they were on the Hill all the time, pushing this forward, pushing this forward, pushing this forward. So organizations like that had a big hand in our chief being a full voting member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Huge, huge.
Very good. Very good. Now, when you weren't active, what's your passion? Did you have another career? Were you, like you said, keeping the air conditioning cold at home? What did you do? What was your
So during the periods of time that I was a traditional guardsman, like in California, I was the office manager for a thrift and loan in Carlsbad, California. So kind of back in the banking business, right?
so banking's kind of been your whole theme
It
throughout the entire.
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean,
Gotcha.
it was kind of an easy niche to fall into, knowing we're going to be there for 3 years, and again, still not having a college degree at that time. It was an easy thing to fall into, and having the 5 years of banking experience, that was pretty cool. And one unique thing that happened while I was at that thrift and loan, I took our deposit to the big bank to make the deposit, and I was like, this pregnant, like 7 months pregnant, and in the teller world, right, the customer's standing in front of you. So I'm standing in front of the teller at this time. I'm the customer. I have all my money laid out, the checks laid out for our business. And this guy jumps up, leaps up right next to me, points a gun in my face and said, "It's a bank robbery." Oh my God. And let me tell you, I hit the floor, her baby belly and all. It was crazy. So
Oh
that
my
our
gosh.
little girl, she went through earthquakes in California, a rock slide, and a bank robbery. So that's my thrift and loan story from California. Then
My
when we moved
gosh.
to Hawaii, I took a year off because my husband had 18 months of training before his 6 month Westpac deployment, and I was working. I slept from like midnight to 5. I had the baby. I had the step kids every other weekend. I had a drill one weekend. I was taking care of the yard, the house, the car, all that stuff, right? It was
Yeah. Yeah.
crazy. It was the worst 6 months of my entire life. So he comes back. It was. I mean, you have to admire the men and women that stay behind and take care of the
Yes.
families that are working full
Yes.
time, getting the kids to
Yes.
school and daycare. Oh my gosh. I mean, I lived it.
Absolutely.
So I kind of have that dual hat. I was a military person as well as, the wife staying at home, taking care of all that when the spouse is
Plus,
deployed.
you
So
had a
I get
bank.
it.
Did they ever catch the guy at the bank robbery?
I have no idea. I have
Oh my
no
gosh.
idea. But you know how it works. When there's a robbery at a bank, lockdown. FBI is called in. Nobody goes in. Nobody goes out. Well, you got this 7 month pregnant woman, right? My Marine husband in his uniform was there in minutes at that door. And he's like, either you're letting me in or I'm taking you out. I'm going to my wife. And I think the bank was probably a little bit nervous, liability with this pregnant woman and all that. So anyway,
Sure.
but when we got to
Gotcha.
Hawaii, I took a year off to be with our daughter. She was at that point, about 2.5, and I hadn't spent a ton of time with her. Daycare raised her to that point, and I just felt it was important to be a mom and just, get her grounded and all that. And then I
Gotcha.
went to work as an office manager for a financial advisor.
Yep. So banking is a common thread through
Yeah,
that
yeah.
entire
Well,
civilian career.
numbers make sense to me. Simple numbers, not algebra and stuff like that, but simple numbers. And I learned so much from Kathy Skillington, first command advisor. I learned so much from her when I worked there, and then I became a full time technician, and I never had a civilian career after that.
Got you. Very good.
Yeah,
28 years, great career. First day of retirement. What did Denise do?
sleep. I slept. I slept. I slept and slept, and then I slept some more. And that's what I told people. Hey, what are you going to do when you retire? Sleep. Well, after you're done sleeping, what are you going to do? I'm going to sleep some more. I did a lot of sleeping, let me tell you. But, we had a big move. We drove across country from D.C. We were on our way to Colorado, and we stopped along the way in a Chicago area, Wisconsin, and the Minnesota to visit family we hadn't seen for a bit. And then we got
Yeah.
here, and then the whole PCS move, right? We unpacked
Yeah.
boxes that had been boxed up for 25 years. I said, no, we're going through all these boxes. We're purging, getting rid of stuff, right? And then
When I got here to this house right here, I did that exact same thing. I
you
took
have
every
to.
box and I just dumped it in the
Yeah,
basement. And
yeah.
I went through it for like a year.
It takes a long time, but now I had time, and I wasn't going to work. I decided that I was going to go back to school because I was going to finish that bachelor's degree. I had a year left to finish, and so I said, I'm doing it. And so I went to school for a year after I retired and finished it
That is amazing that you reached the levels of that you did without a bachelor's
without it.
degree because
Yeah,
it's like the deemed thing that you need to have, but you were able to show
yeah.
relevant work experience. I think that's
And
amazing.
I will tell all service members out there that is exactly right. You have got to get that education done, get it done early, get that bachelor's. And so many of our enlisted corps now, when they retire, they have master's degrees. I mean, that's
Yeah,
common today. But you're
yeah,
right. In my day, you could make it through grit, perseverance, your reputation, your record. You could
yeah,
make it, right?
yeah.
But it's different today. You've got to get that education piece done.
Yeah, whether it's a bachelor's, whether it's a certificate in the trade that you're doing,
Yep,
get
that's right.
certified, something,
Yeah.
because, again, I mean, a lot of other careers, you don't need a bachelor's. You can,
That's right.
engineers, that sort of thing,
That's right.
certificates and
Certificates.
there's all,
That's right.
but like you said, use that GI Bill, get that education.
Absolutely. And
It's,
I did a 4 course strategic leadership master's course. And one of these days I am going to finish that master's, I do believe. But, right now I'm a full time, my husband and I are full time grandparents of our 2-year-old twins.
uh,
Grandchildren. They
wow.
live with us. And so our world is in constant state of chaos all the time. But so
How old are they? How old are they?
2 years, 4 months.
Oh man. Yeah. You got
Yes.
two of them. Oh
Uh,
man.
one doesn't think of, the other one does, and it's just constant. So we love it, though. I mean, it kind of lets us have this do-over because we didn't, daycare raise our daughter the first 2.5 years. So
Yeah.
I'm experiencing things that I never got to experience with my own daughter, right? Which is kind of
Oh,
kind
that's
of a cool
great.
thing. But after I
Yeah.
finished that bachelor's, the next thing was, okay, what's next? What's next? I still felt like I had something to offer, and there were
I noticed that
voices.
you wrote it. I noticed that you
Yeah.
wrote an autobiography.
I did. So there was this voice in my head from a couple senior leaders that I have, interacted with over the years, and a big voice from my husband, write the book, write the book, write the book. So I decided, okay, I'm going to start down this path. And it was one of the most difficult things that I ever did because when I was serving, it was like, okay, this happened. Next, put it back in your mind. Okay, this happened. Next, little box in my head. Okay, this happened. Little box in the head. And there's this chapter 33 in that book talks about threats of rape. That was one of the most difficult things that I went through. And all I did was put it in this little box. I wrapped it up, put a hard bow on it, tucked it back here, and I never dealt with it. And so now I'm writing this book, and some of these experiences now, I'm putting it on paper, and now I'm living it. I'm having to open up all these little boxes back here that I never dealt with because you're busy. Next thing, right? You're taking
Yeah.
care of soldiers and airmen. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I did a lot of crying through the writing of that book. It was really hard for me. And I'm not that, um, I think my brain got switched at birth. I was supposed to be a boy, okay? So I don't have that touchy-feely soft side of me that comes out very often, right? I'm not a crier, that type of thing. I'm pretty grew up tough. You had to be tough when you grew up on the farm with, the way we
Mm,
did. And so
yeah.
I've always been this tough person. But here I am, and I'm just crying through this thing. And it was difficult for me to find the right words that would make someone like you want to turn the page and continue to read. So I actually had to hire a writing coach to help me. Like, what are you thinking here? What are you feeling? Feeling? Are you kidding? I gotta come up with a feeling word. So
So,
it was hard. It was hard.
but it sounds like it was also a little cathartic to go
It
through some of that.
was. It absolutely was. And oftentimes I ask, why did the Lord put me on this path? And I believe it was to help others, certainly that came after me, have things a little bit better. That there are lessons in there. There's leadership lessons in there for those that maybe don't have that mentor or have
Yeah.
path laid out, right? To
Yeah.
learn from it. I mean, there's just so much. And I was honest and I shared probably way too much, but that was the point of it all, was to really, have the reader understand that you can do this despite all these other things, right? So it was, and then it's like the book published and launched, and my mom fell and broke a hip. I was going to this big conference. I was going to be speaking to like 1,500 people, right? This is the big
Yeah.
launch of the book, and I literally am calling, the chief from the ambulance saying, I can't. I have to cancel because I was with my mom at the time. So
Oh,
I
wow.
can't be there because I had to go be with my mom because my dad, just too hard of hearing, a little elderly. He wanted me to deal with the doctors and all that. So I just couldn't understand sometimes the path that the Lord put me on to write this book, and then the launch just went. But I think really when it comes down to it, in addition to writing it for to help others learn, was to make me unwrap all those boxes
Yeah.
and just live through that and kind of unload and get rid of
Yeah.
it. And it did. It really did.
That's great. That's great. So it sounds like just a lot of catharsis for
It
you as well.
was. It was.
Um, it looks like another thing that you did was volunteer was when what you started to do through United Through Reading and the Military Child Education Coalition. How did those opportunities come about, and what was your role in those
So
volunteer
I
opportunities?
met those, the CEOs during my time while I was serving, and I was still in uniform when I got a call from United Through Reading, and I just respectfully asked, I need to take 6 months, just take a knee. Can you contact me 6 months from now? Let me just kind of settle down. And they gave me the grace to do that. And they contacted me. And I was recommended by former Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, Rick West. He was a trustee, at that time, and trustees are supposed to refer who they think would serve well on the board, and he
Mm.
recommended me. And man, I love the mission of United Through Reading, keeping families connected through the Read Aloud program. So back in 1990, when my husband deployed, I bought some little storybooks. Why I thought of this, I have no idea. Bought little storybooks. We hit, record on the cassette player, and my husband read these storybooks, and now he's gone, and I put my daughter on the lap, put his 8x10 picture on the nightstand, press play, here's a storybook, and so she could see daddy's face, that was his voice, and we would go through the storybooks. So
Yeah.
in
Wow.
1990, when he came back, all these kids are crying and screaming because they don't know their daddies at all. And she went right up to him because she recognized the face, she recognized the voice, and all she did was this. She touched his face like, are you real? Because she's been looking at a picture for 6 months, right? So
Yeah.
now it went from VHS tapes to CDs to SD cards, and now we're in the cloud, and it's all free to our veterans and service members. We've got an app,
Wow.
they can read the stories. So when mommy or daddy are deployed or separated because of a long school or a TDY, time zones don't match up, mom or dad at home can go to that cloud, to the app, pick whatever story was pre-recorded, and that child can have a story every single night from whoever is they're separated from. And it's great for grandparents too. It's great. I use it for the grandkids. It's fabulous. So that
Wow.
was really, it's still my passion. So I'm in my 7th year right now, with United Through Reading and have served in different capacities on that board. And Military Child Education Coalition, I served 3 years on that board. And again, it's all about the child. It's all about reading to the child, the education of the child, having kids involved in their schools, mentorship programs. It's much about leadership for, like middle school. Just think about a kid that PCSs to brand new school. They're the ones sitting over there at that table eating lunch by themselves. They have a student to student or a peer to peer type program that they, the purple shirts, right? Military Child Education Coalition. That
Yeah.
that whoever is a volunteer will now be that mentor for that brand new student. They'll have lunch with them. They'll tour the school with them. They'll make sure they get to the right classes in time. They'll find out what their interests are and introduce them to the band members or the choir members or the drama club, or get them involved in the sports that they're interested in, so they're not alone. And that just reduces all kinds of mental health issues. I hate to say it, but suicide issues, things like that. I mean, it just gives that student, that PCSed in, a better experience within the school. So lots, all about the kids, 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 kids.
Wow. It sounds like you had that personal experience was really tied you to
Oh,
that mission.
it was.
That's,
Yeah.
you know, my wife tells stories about that. She didn't know her dad when he came back, and he was always in the field when she was in
Yeah.
Hawaii or Germany. And that's really great.
It's
And
true.
just and she talks about the times where she was in high school or in middle school about not knowing, not having a feeling of belonging. Because like I think you came like from a place like me, a small town. You went from kindergarten to high school with the same people,
I didn't go to
and not
kindergarten.
you didn't go to kindergarten, but
No.
but you know what I mean. It's like you knew the kids
Yes,
from, you knew that community,
absolutely.
and so she doesn't have
Yeah.
that feeling of community.
No, I get
And for
that. I
someone,
get that.
yeah, and for someone like me, it's like it's foreign, but I understand it. Seeing being in the military now,
Yeah.
it's that's great stuff. That's good stuff.
So I want to
Um,
tell you, not only did I not go to kindergarten because it didn't exist for me, okay, but I also, do you know the program Little House on the Prairie?
oh
You know
yeah,
that? Okay.
My dad
Yeah, my
watched it all the
dad.
time. It was yeah, it was always it was always on TV in my three channels as I was catching the school bus.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So Laura Ingalls went to this one-room country school right in the middle of nowhere. That's exactly the kind of country school that I went to for the first 5 years of my
really,
education. Outhouses for the boys and girls. There was no indoor plumbing, right? We had one teacher that taught all 8 grades every subject. So can you imagine how much time we got for core, like reading and math and science and history and English? Nanoseconds. But that's the kind of foundation that I had, right? So I say this to your audience to say, gosh, if she can do this, anybody can do this. You just have to put the right things in place and grow yourself, develop yourself, pay attention, get your education, do what's right, serve with honor.
uh, wow, from first to eighth grade all together as one. I mean, when I was growing up, their schoolhouse was still there, just we didn't go to it. My
Yeah.
grandfather went to it. It was closing when my dad went to school. It's just amazing to hear about stories like that, and to see that where you can go from an education like that, and just as long as
Exactly.
you persevere, that's great stuff. Um, you're now a military advisor for Veterans United Home Loans. Again, sticking with the financial aspect of your
Yeah.
career. What's the role there? What is it seems like a lot of the senior enlisted advisors are advisors for this particular home loan. What are y'all's roles there?
We have 8 military advisors that are part of the military relations team, and I'll tell you, it's so much fun getting together with them because it's all that service rivalry, right? And they're all poking at each other and things like that, and it's just awesome, right? And of course, I'm the female, the token female on the team. Someday we're going to have another one, but our role really is to I know it. Um, our role
Love it.
is
Love it.
to educate our veterans, our currently serving service members, and our veterans on their VA home loan benefit. We're not the ones, doing the loans. We can't get into details because we're not licensed, but we're there to educate the force that you have this benefit. I can remember asking my stepdaughter a few years ago, "Hey, Nikki, when are you Mike going to buy a home?" She goes, "We can't afford it. They're in California, right? We can't afford it. It's
Oh
that money
yeah.
down, right?" I said, "Nikki, you're a veteran." She said, "Oh, that's right. Forgot, right?" So we will attend like all the major conferences, and our boss, the vice president of military relations, Pam Swan, who everyone knows, she pairs a respected military advisor with whatever conference that is. So, for example, AUSA.
That's a big one.
Yep. So we have two former sergeants major of the Army that are on our team. They would work that conference. She'll most likely have me work that conference. I have the last number of years because of the Army Guard presence there. So we're in the booth with her, and we're just educating the force as they're walking by. And you would just be amazed at how many people come to that booth and have no idea about that benefit. So
Really.
that's the main thing that we do is we're
That's
educating the force, and we will go and we will speak. We also, go to our home office in Columbia, Missouri, and we help educate the loan officers and their teams on, how they can better serve the military and veteran community, because many
great.
of them have never served or don't have any affiliation with military. So they will ask us questions. One question was very simple, like, how do I talk to a veteran that is suffering from PTSD? So we had a conversation about that. Or how do I respond when I thank a veteran for their service and they're like, "Oh, you don't need to thank me." Well, so we kind of help them work through those things. And a lot of times, too, there may be somebody that's just kind of sitting on the fence. And let's say that it's a National Guard soldier or airman that I'm not sure if I want to do this. I'm not sure if I want to go with Veterans United Home Loans or with, Company A. And so then, my boss will reach out and say, "Hey, Denise, can you call Sergeant so and so or Sergeant so and just speak to them about your experience." All of the
Wow.
military advisors, we have our loans through Veterans United Home Loans, and we're proud to be able to say that because we
Yeah.
believe in the company, we believe in what we do, and so it just works. And we tell the loan officers, use us, use our names. If you're talking
Yeah.
to a sailor, "Hey, I got a personal relationship with Mick Rick West, or Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force Jim Roy, or Ken Preston, Sergeant Major of the Army, Dan Daly, Sergeant Major of the Army, all formers, right? And the Marine Corps. Okay, let's get the Marine
Sergeant Major
Corps in
Barrett.
there. Sergeant Barrett, and
Yeah.
now we have Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps Ron Green. So we
Oh,
just have this
really?
great team. Yeah, we have this
I have
great
two.
team.
I'm very personally related. Or they've both really. I have quick stories about both of them. Sergeant Major Barrett, he was checking in to my headquarters combat camera as I was checking out. I was a sergeant there, and so I was there when he got his official photo. So every first time I see his
Cool.
official photo, I was like, yeah,
Okay.
I remember that getting that photo. Sergeant Major Green was a huge influence on my career. He was the battalion sergeant major at the same time Sergeant Major Barrett was the sergeant major of the Marine Corps. Uh, he had a profound uh, time on my career. There was a time when I really didn't know I was in a bad spot professionally as far as leadership, and he really I don't know what I would have done without him, honestly.
Well, that's really a great story, and I
Yeah,
hope someday that you're going to be able to share that with him. There's so many lives that people touch, and
I
they
saw
have
him
no
in
idea.
I saw him in Charlotte when he was a sergeant major of the Marine Corps, and I was working for NASCAR, and I made a point to go wherever he was to let him know that. And he
Cool.
remembered me. He remembered
That's cool.
me, my staff and COs, both of them,
Isn't that
my
amazing?
leadership above that. And he goes, "We took care of you." And I said, "Yes, you did." And
That's cool.
and I never
It's a good
forgot it.
man.
So
It's a good
he
man.
is a really good man. He is a really
Yeah.
good man. Probably one of the most influential senior enlisted advisors or senior or sergeant majors, first sergeants I ever had in my career. Easily, easily.
Nice.
Um,
It's good. It's really nice to have good people like that in your
yeah,
career that you can look up
absolutely.
to and you can, follow and emulate. Absolutely.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just remember him coming out of an office, coming down, walking across everybody, and coming to my desk and going, "Sorry, you're not going to have an issue with that anymore." And he was able
Excellent.
to handle that issue in a professional manner, to where everybody was able to still do the mission and keep me
Fantastic.
in the mission that I was doing, and not take my mind or make me want to move or anything. He was able
Yeah.
to work the situation out.
Yeah, you're able now
Absolutely.
to focus, right? Focus
Exactly.
on your job. That's right. Instead of
Exactly.
having whatever it was, weighing down on your shoulders.
Yeah. No,
That's
just a great man.
leadership.
That's great, man. It's a great,
Yeah,
man.
good.
So that's very innovative that Veterans United Home Loans does that. I'd like to, that's a mortgage company, and I don't think that's an endorsement or indicative or anything like that. I think what it is, it's just showing that there is innovation there that I think it'd be great if other mortgage companies emulated that. It's good stuff. Summit six former senior enlisted advisors, and you've talked about a couple of them. Start an LLC. How did that come about? Is it the ones that were all serving together? Were you all just like a core group? And what's the
Yeah, we
mission of your
were.
group?
We
Gotcha.
we were a core group at the Pentagon. We all served together. So I'm like, halfway, three quarters of the way through writing my book, and I'm just not loving life. And I get this email from Rick West, right, the MCPON, and he puts out to the initial 6 military advisors that were with Veterans United. So we've added Dan Daly and Ron Green since that. So now there's 8, but the original 6. He says to all of us, "Hey, we ought to write a leadership book together." And my head was about to explode. So I'm sitting in
You're like,
Colorado.
another book? No.
Exactly. That was my thought.
How
I'm
about
like,
no?
no, if he could hear me screaming from Colorado, I'm sure. So I waited to see what everybody else was going to say because I'm in the throes of my own book, right?
Yeah.
And so one by one, they all came on board and said, "Yeah, great idea. Yeah, let's talk about this. Let's get started. I'm in." Blah, blah. So sent to all,
Denise. Dot
"Great
dot dot.
idea. I'm in." And I was, because you can't be the only one, right? Right?
Yeah.
You can't be
Yeah.
the only one to say no. And certainly, as the National Guard person, and the only girl, I could not say no. I'm part of this team, and I'm all in. But the beauty of that book, Reaching the Summit, was that we have our own chapter. It wasn't like I had to write the whole book, right? So we all had our own chapter. And I was able to take some pieces from my book, From the Prairie to the Pentagon, and just, reword it a little bit, do some
Yeah.
wordsmithing, change some things around, this, that. And so I was able to use
Put a
some material.
specific direction on the story.
Yeah. So that's how that came about. So with the book, then we had to we formed this, LLC. So Breaching the Summit 6 of us, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we have gone to like the Coast Guard Academy as a group and had a panel. And I believe that there's other places where a couple of our team, Summit 6, will have go and speak or be on a panel at AUSA.
Okay.
COVID stopped this, but they were going to have a
Yeah.
panel of us because Casemate Publishing picked up our book, Breaching the Summit. Excuse me. So they were going to have all the authors there on a panel and do a book signing. And that was going to be really cool. And then COVID kind of kiboshed that. So
It, hopefully
we
that changes soon.
I do.
Hopefully that
Yeah, I
changes.
hope so too. Yeah. As a matter of fact,
Um,
I'm leaving shortly after this. I'm headed to Grand Rapids. I'm going to speak with the National Guard, Michigan National Guard Association. I'm so excited because, we haven't been out doing much, right? I'm like, oh, I get to
right.
go interact with soldiers and airmen, and ooh, good. But yeah, so that's Summit 6. It's been a great experience with the guys, and we're all really lockstep on what we're doing, and we go and we speak on leadership and various things like that. So it's
uh,
been good.
um, is it 2 books or 1? Because I noticed that there's
So
leadership lessons from 6 military journeys to the top, and then leadership lessons from the U.S. military's best. Is that 2 books or 1?
So we have Breaching the Summit. Okay, I don't have the black one in front with me right now. So when we first published Breaching the Summit, the cover was kind of black, and down below it had all of our pictures on the front cover.
Yeah.
When
Yes. Yeah.
When Casemate picked up our book and decided to publish it, then they changed the cover and they put us on the back. The content is the same, but they gave it a
Gotcha.
different look in the front. So we've got a different, with the ocean and the summit
Little
there, Breaching
little
the Summit.
little different wrapper on it.
Yep,
Put a
little
little
different
different wrapper
wrapper.
on it.
So
Gotcha.
it's the same book, just the cover is different now.
Gotcha. And like you said, you guys do speaking tours, but it's changed a little bit under COVID. How have you guys been able to adapt to that those changes?
Unfortunately, all the speaking it just stopped, right? And
Mm.
and we understand that. I mean, organizations weren't allowed to host different venues, but we're seeing now this year things are starting to pick up, right?
Good
And so
stuff.
we have high hopes. I believe that our boss is trying to get all of us to the American Legion convention in August, I believe it is. Don't quote me on that. It could be September. I forgot.
Gotcha.
But to have all of us on a panel, right? And then maybe do a book signing after that type of thing. And individually, we do those things as well. So, for example, when I go to Michigan now, as part of their registration, the first 100 people get a book, Breaching the Summit, as part of their registration. And then I do book signings across, the country when I'm here or there as well. The other guys do too. And I'm doing it for both of my books, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the guys, they're promoting Reaching the Summit, but I'm promoting both of mine.
Now, is it just speaking tours, or other corporate or educational, professional coaching opportunities that
There
you're
are,
pursuing?
yep, there are different organizations will bring us in, and depending upon what the need is, I mean, they may target an area that they want us to specifically talk to, not sharing our story, but this area of leadership or different things like that. Absolutely, there are opportunities.
Very good. Very good. Now, what is your stamp on the book, on that book? What did you want to share that you wanted to get in your writing, that you wanted to get across?
I'm Reaching the Summit.
Yes.
There's about 180 years collectively, right? Combined, but the six of us that wrote that book.
Yeah.
And we really believe that this book, it's a leadership book from the highest levels of our senior enlisted corps. And it can be used for the emerging leaders that want to see how did they do it. It can be used for our first second lieutenants that are making their way on how to maybe get some tips on how they could manage and lead the enlisted corps. It's for corporations to see from a different perspective, perhaps some leadership. Leadership is leadership, and it's transferable from the military into the civilian sector to the corporate world. Leadership is leadership. Okay. So we're hoping, and we have had corporations reach out to us about speaking and utilizing this book, as well as our military. When I see, like, I carry books with me all the time, right? So if I see a soldier and an airman in the airport, we'll give them a copy of the book, right? Just sign it to them, and here's a copy of this book, depending upon what the conversation might be, right? I mean, it might be
Yeah.
just what they need at that very moment, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we wanted to share our leadership experiences, kind of how we did this, broke that summit, right? Breached it, and in the hopes that others will learn from that. And that
Yeah.
they can see all six of us that wrote that book came from pretty humble beginnings. Yeah, very humble beginnings.
That's great.
Um,
That's
the
great.
Corps today is so much more educated than we were when we were, junior and making our way through. So we wanted
Yeah.
to be able to share our stories in the hopes that it will help them reach their full potential as well.
Very good. Very good. If you were to pick out one focus of leadership that you wanted to make sure that you got through that book, what would it have been?
The biggest thing for me probably would be to respectfully do not take no for an answer. That was huge for me through my whole career. And I
Love it.
always put that respectfully at the front, because you know as well as I do, having worn the uniform, there's a way to buck the system, and then there's a way to buck the system. So respectfully, right? And so
Tact.
this story, I'll tell you, I was a senior master sergeant in a billet that was an E8, hard E8. There was no promotion opportunity. And I was okay with that. I really was, because it wasn't about promotion throughout my career. It was about how can I better serve in different positions? How can I make a difference on this organization? I would have been so proud to retire as a senior master sergeant. But it just so happens that this position opened up, the state command chief for Hawaii. And I said, I can do that job. I meet all the requirements. It was open to all chiefs and eligible senior master sergeant. So prepare along your whole entire career. You have to prepare for that opportunity that's going to come when you least expect it. So so just so happened that the Air Guard commander was in our building, and I said, "Sir, I'm interested in applying for the state command chief job." And he told me flat out that I couldn't do it. He said, you're a full-time technician. Only a drill status, a part-time guardsman can serve in that position. Well, I knew better than that because other states had full-time command chiefs that, perhaps were technicians in a different job as well. But I said, well, sir, where would I find that information that you are, telling me? What regulation would that be? I'll get back to you, Sergeant Jelinski-Hall. 2 weeks later, still nothing. General so and so, per our conversation, da, 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 da. And I got a response back from him, and he said, HR was a human resources regulation, right? HR, whatever. And while incompatible with your full time job, there is a waiver process. Well, ding, ding. That's all I needed to hear.
There
So
you
I
go.
got into that regulation, trust but verify, right? It's not dogma. Just because it's always been doesn't mean it is or should be. It's not always fact. People will tell you something that they believe and it's fact and it's not. So you have to dig into the books yourself. And so I did. Wrote up the letter for the
Waiver.
waiver, got it approved, done. So respectfully, don't take no for an answer. I can't tell you how many times I was told, no, you can't, that can't be done, it can't be done. Put the how in front of that. How can it be done? Because the how assumes that it can be done. And my experience has been most of the time, 99% of the time, there is a way. There is a way over, around, under. And I don't mean, skirting regulations or doing anything that's not within, the regulations. That is not what I mean. But be creative. Think outside of that box, right? Look at it from a different angle and you can probably do it, whatever it is. There's a waiver, there's a way.
Leadership lessons from Denise Jelinski-Hall. I'm just gonna shut up and listen. I like it. Love it.
No.
Um, Denise, what is one thing that you learned during your time in the service, during your time in the military, that you apply to what you do today?
The first thing that comes to mind is you have to care about people. You just do. I mean, you can get so busy just, marching down this way and not focusing on the force, and then you miss something. And I have a great story about that. But that now, taking off the uniform, it still applies. I care deeply about, United Through Reading. I care deeply about my church. My husband and I are facilitators for Focus, which helps young engaged couples prepare for marriage. Well, we've gone through a lot of
That's good.
bumps on our road, so we want to share, right? And we got to care about them. We don't go through the mechanics of it. We could just check the box and do what's required, but we share the good, the bad, the ugly, right? Um,
That's
and
great.
so you notice people, I mean, there have been times that I've been out on a hike and might be sitting down over there, and you can see that there's stress. Maybe they're dehydrated, maybe they're heat exhaustion, maybe they have altitude sickness. You just have to be mindful and care about people. And I learned that throughout my career, to pay attention and not take care of in that sense, but you know be there with a resource, be there with a word, be there with, taking care of them and helping them to be successful. So I was at this graduation, this NCO Academy graduation, and these NCOs have gone through 6 weeks of what, right? And they're
Yeah.
tired and they're exhausted and they want to get home to their families, and they're standing up on stage, flight by flight, just so happy to get their graduation certificate. And there was this one NCO in this lineup, right? That was just, her head was down, her body was just drained. You could tell something is wrong with this NCO. This should have been one of the happiest moments of her life in her career, right? Like
Yeah.
all the others you saw, the big smiles. And I made a mental note that after, the ceremony, I was going to find her. Now you've got a room of 300 airmen, all in service dress uniforms, right? We all look the same. What's the likelihood that I'm going to find her? And typically, as senior leaders, you're the last ones out of the room, right? And I'm talking with various airmen that graduated, and I found the Hawaii group that graduated, and connected with them for a bit, and I believe that this was through the grace of God that this young NCO walked by me, and I said, excuse me," and I won't go into details, but we had a long conversation, and this airman was in stress. I mean, she needed some help bad. So I made the connections, got a hold of her state command chief, connected them. And I, to this day, that was, gosh, back in probably 2011 or 2012. So almost like 10 years.
Yeah.
She wrote a testimonial in my book, and you can go read that. And she talked about how I saved her life that day. And to this day, I stay in touch with her. It was just taking those minutes to find out what the need was and what was happening. You know, an NCO that just doesn't know me from Adam, you think they want to open up to me, but she trusted enough to open up, and that I was going to follow through and help her because she didn't know where to turn, right? So
You
she's
you showed that
successful
you
today.
showed that you were engaged. You showed that you're an engaged leader,
Absolutely.
and that's
Yeah.
sometimes a lot of times that's all it takes to really
Yeah.
gain that, to get that
That's
trust, to
right.
really affect somebody like that, and that's great.
Yeah.
And to
She's
take
had
care
a
of your
great career. She's married. She's daughter. She's thriving, and
it's
so
great.
proud of her.
That's great. No, it is be showing that engagement, being that engaged leader. You take care of your people, the mission will take care of itself. 100%.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. If you serve pure of heart, when I say that, it sounds a little nanny panny, but serve pure of heart, meaning that you do what's best for the country. You do the best for the organization in which you're serving in, and you do the very best for the people that you are responsible for and that you're leading. And you know what? You will have a successful career.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, you take care of the people, the taking care of the organization is going to take care
Yep.
of itself. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Um, Denise,
Hoorah.
we've covered we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything that I've missed or haven't asked that you think is be important to share for anybody that's listening to this? A parting
I
shot,
guess
if you
a
will.
parting shot, I want to give a parting shout out to all the families. We serve, we put on that uniform every day, and we stand pack to pack and shoulder to shoulder, with our brothers and sisters, and the family is left behind. And oftentimes we recognize our military spouses here and there, but I give all credit to our military spouses who enable us to go and do the mission and the work of the Department of Defense and serving in our respective branches, because they are home taking care of everything. So when we put on that uniform, we don't have to worry about that. It's taken care of at home. So spouses that listen to this, thank you. Thank you for your contributions. We serve, you serve as well. Thank you for all that you do for the respective branch that your spouse is in, because I know that whether it's the Army, the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, the National Guard, I know that each one is better because of what you are doing in supporting your military member that's out there fighting the good fight.
Got you. Very good. What about for I mean, a lot of my audience are veterans and
Oh, my
VA
veterans.
and VA employees. Um, Anything for them that they might glean from, any parting shot that you might
Absolutely.
have for them?
Our veterans and our veteran service organizations that are out there taking care of our warriors, our nation's heroes, you know, I look at my dad who passed away last year, and I think about the care that he got and the help that he got from those that went, after him, frankly, because he was elderly. And here he had younger veterans helping him navigate through the system of the VA,
Oh wow.
and taking care of him, right? And that's what veterans do. They have their buddies back, they have their six, they're out there working for them, and the people at the VSOs that help our military comb through their medical records to say, you didn't do this, you didn't annotate that, oh, you can claim this or that. They're out there helping where lot of veterans, even present day, they don't know where to turn. They don't know where to get how to get started on doing some things.
Yeah.
So I applaud our veterans. I'm one of them. My husband's one of them. My stepdaughter's one of them. I mean, I've got a nephew who's serving. I mean, I love our veterans, and they do so much. They still do so much for this country, and they're so patriotic. God bless them, each and every one of them.
Outstanding. Absolutely. Well, Denise, that's about as much time as we got. I really appreciate you coming on Borne the Battle, sharing your story, and we are out. Have a good one.
Thank you so much. Hoorah!
Raw, we're out.
We gotta get 'em one way or the other. Machine gunner, firefight, bullets fly, day and night rain. Simplify till we die, another campaign. My desk is a rock where the drug lords cut up millions. My pen is a 7.62 round that'll cut 'em down in an instant. Point, click, pull the trigger to the tune of falling brass. Full benefits and a purple heart and a Russian-made bullet in my back. Raining down lead, punching that clock. Get 'em boys, I'm laying down cover. Machine gunner, firefight, bullets fly, day and night rain. Simplify, do or die, another campaign. Here we go, lock and load, 0331, lug 1,000 rounds, and I ain't bringing back one.